the top story, Professor Sibusiso Bengu is to be laid to rest in an official funeral Category 2 being held at the main campus of the University of Zululand. Our reporter Simphiwe Makhanya is covering that story for us. So let's cross over to him, just get an update and see how things are going there. Simphiwe, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Leah. Well, indeed, preparations are now underway, for the commencement of the funeral service of the late Professor Sibusiso Bengu. That is going to be held at this very hall where we are. In fact, I'm going to step out of the shot and ask my colleague Sibu just to give our viewers a sense of what is currently unfolding as, of course, those preparations continue. A lot has been said, though, Leanne, about the life and times of Professor Bengu, particularly his contribution to the education sector in the country. And of course, he held various positions, one of those being the ambassador to Germany at some point. But let's now reflect on his life and engage the person who knows him quite well. Actually, it's Dr. Blade Nzimande. Thank you so much, Doc, for your time. Perhaps let's start there with your fond memories of the late professor.
Yes, thank you very much. Of course, one would like to start by expressing one's condolences to the family of Professor Bengu. But we know that they are mourning, but at the same time, they should be a very proud family for having produced someone who has made such a huge contribution. Well, firstly, maybe starting personally. When I'm standing here, I graduated in this hall. It brings back, in 1980 for my first degree, it brings back memories, including the fact that September 1977, I had run out of funds to study at university. I was short of 100 rand, actually, which was a lot of money at the time, because the total fees were just over 400 rands. And Professor Bengu gave me a loan. A few of us, and we signed for that loan. I paid it when I was working, actually. When I reflect and think about that, maybe those were the beginnings of NSFAS, because there was no NSFAS at that time. That saved me from dropping out at university. He had done that because he was Dean of Students, but at his own initiative. It's strictly speaking, it was not money from the university, but I understand he had done some fundraising from the churches. He was very linked with religious organizations and so on. Now, that's very important to remind ourselves, because one thing about Professor Bengu is that he was a very kind person. And we need buckets of that from leadership today. To be kind, to be caring about our people in a genuine sense. To me, that was one of he was a gentleman also, but very firm and determined in transformation. Of course, I worked him much closely for the first 5 years of our democracy. Between 1994 and 1999, I was chairperson of the Portfolio Committee. Professor Bengu led in the promulgation of foundational legislation that today we've made the achievements we've made in education. Because of that foundation he laid, one can count a number of important pieces of legislation. The very first piece of legislation that he led, which we were championing in Parliament as Portfolio Committee Chair, was what was called the National Education Policy Act. And the opposition was, especially the white opposition, dead opposed to it. What was the purpose of that legislation? Was to create a single framework for one education system. Because Professor Bengu had to bring together 19 different schooling departments and 21 universities, if I'm not mistaken, at the time, that were racially based. The schools also were racially and ethnically based. So he had to pull together legislation to pull together all these things. That was like a real huge, significant change.
Dr. Nzimande, what can be done to honor the legacy of Professor Bengu?
Well, firstly, I think we must remember that Professor Bengu was a school teacher for the longest of time, was a founding principal of KwaDlangezo High School, which is next door here. What we need to do is to honor teachers. as part of his legacy. We are saying goodbye to a teacher, and a very good teacher. By the way, my wife was a head girl under Professor Bengu, and he says, he never carried a stick, but he was actually respected. He never carried a cane. I have also done my own little contribution because when I was in higher education, we've got a special grant dedicated to support and develop your historically disadvantaged institution. It's named after him. It's called the Sibusiso Bengu Development Grant. I was honored that he came when we launched this in Durban. He says to me, "Thank you, Minister, for honoring me, but remember, make sure this actually does not fail." So we are saying to teachers, be as dedicated as Professor Bengu. We are saying to our universities, continue on the mission. By the way, he passed the NSFAS Act to make it NSFAS, because before it was just a fund that had been established but didn't have proper legislation. And also we are saying to honor him to the students. Make use of the opportunity of being given free money by government to study at universities and TVET colleges. Grab that with both hands. That's how the youth of today can actually honor his legacy. It's something that's very important.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Nzimande.
Thank you.
Well, that is the Dr. Nzimande, Blade Nzimande, the Minister of Innovation, Science, of course, reflecting on the life and times of Professor Bengu, who's going to be laid to rest today at this very hall where we are. Of course, we are expecting that the Deputy President of the country, His Excellency Deputy President Paul Mashatile, is going to deliver the eulogy when this particular funeral is being conducted, which is a special official funeral category 2, as declared by President Cyril Ramaphosa. We're expecting proceedings here, Leanne, to start at about 10 o'clock this morning. Expect to you in Johannesburg for now.
All right, thanks so much to our colleague Simphiwe Makhanya, who's out covering that story. Remember, we will be taking that live as well this morning.